I'm just going to go ahead and have each one of the ladies introduce themselves to you guys. So this topic today about white women raising Black kids is centered around the fact that we have this social injustice or social justice issues going on around, especially for about racism, systemic racism. I'm very passionate about this topic because as a healthcare professional, I feel like what's going on, the killing of Black men and the systemic racism has become a public health issue. So public health issue, I know where I work, all of my coworkers and the leadership are working towards fighting racism and systemic racism in the healthcare. And as citizens of the world, we are all responsible to do our part into bringing change, into trying to change and fight systemic racism. Each one of us has their own way of doing it. And for me, I appreciate this platform to allow me to the opportunity to address these issues that are going on. So not only know that not only Black women have these issues of going to bed and not being able to sleep because they're thinking about their kids out there, what's going to happen to them, but also the white women who have Black children may feel the same way. Let's find out. So Katie, I will start with you. Please introduce yourself to the viewers.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Royce, and I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, about 3 blocks from the site where George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. And so we live very close to there. I have 2 kids. Both of them are...
Can we have it louder a little bit, Malik?
Sure, I'll try to get closer. How's that?
It's hard here. Okay, go ahead.
I have 2 children. One is 35 and lives in North Minneapolis and has 2 children, and that's Brandon. My 2 grandkids are Brooklyn and Naima, and Isa too, who still, I'm lucky enough, still lives at home and just graduated from high school. So 15 years apart, both strongly rooted in Senegalese culture, thank God. And I'm a career community organizer.
Thank you so much, Katie. And Colleen, can you introduce yourself to our viewers, please?
Yeah, my name is Colleen McDonald-Juve. I'm the CEO of a community health center that actually serves South Minneapolis. So many of our patients and staff were impacted by what happened when George Floyd was murdered, and have been for a long time suffered from police brutality. I have children, 6, 9, and 12. And so I enjoy grow up in the world, and they are very also engaged in their culture as well, and understanding what it means to be Black in the United States. So we have a lot of conversations at the dinner table about that. So.
Thank you so much, ladies. I just shared this live on my page, and I tagged you too, so that our friends can also view it. And thank you for that introduction, and I'm very pleased to have you both here. Let's go back to Katie. Sorry, Katie. I'm gonna keep doing the African thing instead of Katie. We'll say Kathy. But Katie, can you please tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I went into the Peace Corps right out of my college. And I grew up in a almost all white environment. And when I
and viewers, if you can hear, please let us know. Katie's voice is a little bit low, so if you can't hear what she's saying, let us know so we can try to increase the sound. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
That's okay. I went into the Peace Corps, just filled out an application and said, I want to go anywhere in the whole world. I didn't choose Senegal or Africa. And when I got the letter from the Peace Corps, they said that I was going to Senegal. So there I went. And I was there for about 3.5 years, living out in the rural area, Malam Chirine, Chikau Talibe. On the way to Tambacounda. So it was right where the desert was coming in. And I worked rural development projects for 2 or 3 years. And then went into Dakar for the last 5 months while I was there. And Mamadou Diop, who was a teacher in Peace Corps, and I fell in love. And Brandon was born right at the end of my 4th year in Senegal, but I was kicked out of the country. We were trying to get me to stay and have the baby in Senegal. And Peace Corps, the administration of Peace Corps in Washington said absolutely not. They claimed that no Peace Corps volunteer had ever had a baby in Senegal, which maybe it was true, but who cares? I was going to stay anyway. And then they threatened to take away my health insurance. So I was forced to move back and leave Senegal and came home about 8 months pregnant with Brandon, who is now the 35. My parents,
It's breaking a little bit.
a year and a half. The house was in Minneapolis. Been here for about.
Kathy, you're breaking a little bit. Yeah, Kathy, Katie was breaking a little bit. Go ahead. Katie?
Continue with, so when Brandon was about 5-6 years old, we visited Senegal and stayed with his dad and his new wife. And we had a good visit, probably a month and a half. And then Mamadou visited us. And we visited back and forth a couple of times. And then Mamadou decided to move to America. Peace Corps had laid a lot of people off, so he was not teaching with Peace Corps anymore. Moved here, moved in with me, and I became a second wife. Aissatou Diop is Mamadou's first wife, still married to Aissatou. And Mamadou lived here with us for probably 7 years. And in that time, my Aissatou was born. We named her after Aissatou. And the rest is history. Mamadou moved back to Senegal when Aissatou was about 6, and now they go back and forth, and sometimes I go back and forth. Not enough though. We need Colleens.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, we, the Senegalese community, we consider you a Senegalese woman, and it shows on how much you attach to the culture and to the people, and we just love you as one of us, our sisters. And your kids are lovely. Colleen,
thank you, honey.
Can you please tell us about your background, and then we're going to move on to the questions.
Sure. So I grew up in a predominantly white town as well, rural town. And then, but I was always really interested in social justice work. I used to read all the social justice, civil rights movement books I could read. And then I decided to go to France for a year. And I ended up in Angers, France. And I spent my time staying in the dorms with all of the Senegalese and Mauritanians. So I instantly felt at home and was kind of adopted by all the Senegalese and Mauritanians there. Spent a whole, really it blew my mind and really raised awareness for me about what I wanted to do. And so then I came back to the US to finish my undergraduate. And I said, well, I'm going to go to Senegal. I just want to go to Senegal. And in fact, when I was a little kid, I even woke up one day and said, I'm going to go in a Francophone African country. I mean, I have no idea why I thought that, but I knew I was going to.
So what made you choose Senegal?
I just loved Senegal. So I loved all the Senegalese immigrants that I met. I loved the culture. We used to eat dinner every night. This is all in France, right? So we used to eat dinner every night. We do the tontine. We would cook together, and I just felt really welcomed and accepted, and I just loved that. And then I came back to school, and I said, well, I don't really just want to be a French teacher. I really want to do international development is what I decided I wanted to do. And so I studied in Minnesota, had this program in Senegal. They had the Minnesota Studies in International Development, MSID program. So, and I lived in Washington State, which was a lot warmer than Minnesota. But I got up and I just went to the University of Minnesota and I got into the program. And I met a professor named Charlie Segnet, who worked a lot with a woman who does basic education for women in rural Senegal, Molly Melching. The program's called Tostan. And so I applied for some grants. I managed to get all the grants, and I went there and spent a whole year. And I spent time both in the villages, 5 or 6 different villages. I was mostly based out of Chas and went to Medina Dahar and spent time in Kolda as well with the Pular in Kolda. Loved Kolda.
Yes, I was very impressed when I met you the first time. You speaking Fulani in Minnesota.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just loved the woman there. Had done a lot of work around health and education. So then I came back to the U.S. and I really felt lost. So I ended up staying in Minnesota because Minnesota is where I felt at home. And then I kind of stumbled into the clinic where I work at, and I felt, again, instantly accepted because the clinic I serve is mostly immigrant and refugees. So I got to speak French, and I was working on refugee mental health issues, which I really loved. And then eventually I met my husband after many, many dances at Senegalese parties.
Yes. I remember those.
Many years later, I met my husband, who probably thought I danced too much when he first met me. But I'd love to dance. I used to go to all the African. And then we have been married now for 10 years. And we have little Fatou, Soraya Awa, and then Kairos, who's 12. So we actually were planning to go to Senegal this year, which will have been my first time in almost like over 20 years. And I'm just really wanting to go. And then, of course, COVID broke out. So we are probably going to have to pause that for a while. But yeah, I just really have always loved Senegal, loved the culture, loved the people, and just believe in the values of Senegalese culture very deeply. The teranga, the generosity, the sharing, the caring for people. So for me, I think that's kind of what's always resonated with me.
Yes, and we love you too, and we love your family. You have a beautiful family, and thank you all for sharing with us. And I'm sure your traveling and your experience had shaped you and made you the best people that you are right now. So my next question for you too is that what you both have multi-racial or biracial kids that are identified as Black, and you are white. So how is your upbringing, the way your parents raised you as a white child in a white family, how is that different than how you raising your your kids who are half white but then half Black, but who are considered Black when they get out of the house? What is the difference in that raising and upbringing? I'll have Katie go first.
Very, very different. So I have brought a lot of information, and my children have taught my family a lot about race relations, about other parts of the world. I was not taught any of that. So we didn't even talk about race in my family. It was a typical white, we are all that matters attitude, where I was brought up. And I very intentionally chose a different road. So I live in the inner city My parents lived exclusively in the suburbs. We talk about race all the time. I think with Brandon, I was still young enough and white enough that I did not give him the essential, all the essential tools he needed to be careful as the Black man in this world. And, you know, luckily he was arrested a couple times, but nothing ever happened. The charges were always dropped. But I did not have that conversation with him until he was in his 20s. That's when a very good friend of mine, an African-American man, and you guys maybe have met him, Metric. He's come to many of the things back in the day. Tall guy, dreads. Metric said to me, you have to, and I can't remember what the incident was, but I would, my natural inclination as a white person and kind of a aggressive, assertive white woman is to tell the cops to go to hell. Get the hell out of here. I've actually talked to cops like that. And Brandon can never talk to cops like that. And I was not explicit enough with him in those days. And we're lucky that nothing ever happened. And his nature is not like mine. He has a quieter nature. So, but Isatu, who is 21, is 20 now. I was way more understanding of whiteness, of racism, of the dangers of being Black in America. And so Isatu knows that. But Brandon was lucky to that he didn't get in trouble. I did not teach that lesson well enough when he was young.
Yeah, Brandon is a very fine young man. I got the pleasure to invite him my last show as a Black man, talking about his experience, and he's very much very articulate. And what he shared was that he never thought of himself as Black or have the experience of feeling in a certain way until he went somewhere and heard some kid calling him the N-word. That's when he realized, oh, I am not white, because he has his white mom and getting raised in this environment, and he was kind of like, it was like a shock to him, and the fact that you were younger and like you said, you were too white and you didn't understand. That's probably why it's different than Isatu, his little sister. And then Kathy, before I move on to Colleen, tell me how did you view systemic racism before having your kids, before even meeting your husband or traveling? Were you aware that there is systemic racism? I know you're aware there's individual racism, or a lot of people identify themselves as, I am not racist. Yes, a lot of people are not racist, but they're not aware of the systemic racism that's going around, and it's so normal, and it's so normalized that they're not aware of it, and they don't see it, and therefore they don't make any effort to change it because they don't know it's there. And that's why we have this show, and that's why I think sometimes people like you may not know it until you're on the shoes, until you have the kids that are Black. So tell me about how much you were aware of the systemic racism before having your kids.
Almost nothing. Now before going to Senegal. So that would be the same before having Brandon. I had a couple of Black friends, but very few. And I was not, probably housing discrimination. I knew there was some housing discrimination, but did I think about the everyday pain that people of color and indigenous people go through in America? No, I did not. When I went to Senegal, I had an experience that was very eye-opening for me. And so I go to Senegal. It's the first time I've ever been in a situation where I'm the minority. I'd never had that before. So I was in the training. I was in the training in TS. So it was the first 3 months you're in country. We were training, and I was walking from the training center into downtown TS. I was by myself, and I think I had jeans on. And this was 1982. And we hadn't been told never wear jeans, but there had been a suggestion that we might want to be in dresses. And that day I wore jeans. And I was on the way, and there was an older man in a charrette, driving a charrette, and he took his whip and whipped me publicly in the streets. And I was so shocked. I just stood there, and finally I grabbed the whip, and he didn't fall out of the charrette, but he stopped whipping me and drove off. But for me, everyone was, "How are you? Okay? Is everything?" And I wasn't bad. I wasn't physically harmed. But what I remember thinking immediately, and it's always been my thought about this incident, is, well, it's about time. Now you know what people of color feel like in a space where they are being attacked for their color. And I was probably being attacked for those jeans, but I was also very clearly a tubob. And there was, I never felt anything other than, this is an eye-opening experience to, for once, be the one who is attacked for the color of my skin. But before my kids, girl, no, I did not know. I did not have an assessment of systemic racism like I do now.
Yes, and it's interesting that you got that experience, and you see a little bit of what the people of color are experiencing every day. And also it's very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people will identify with what you just said, the fact that they were not aware of systemic racism, just focusing on the microcosm, saying, I'm not racist, I have black friends, or I have black kids, or black grandkids, but what they don't know is that the systemic racism is going on, and everybody is just comfortable with it, pretty much.
That's right. That's right.
So, Colleen, we'll start off with, take off from there. Before having your kids, were you aware of the systemic racism in America?
Yes. I mean, I think the first time that I encountered it was actually, or understood racism as a whole, more on a systemic level, when I was in France. And the reason why I say that is because I saw many times, immigrants being round up and pushed off of the bus, and people, like, I'd go places with my friends and we wouldn't be allowed access because they were Black. So I think for me, that was one of the bigger sort of aha moments that I had. And at that point, I tended to think France is worse than the United States, which is absolutely not at all true. But that was because I was still in my white world in the United States, and here I was seeing a different world. So I think when I came back, I did have a bigger and greater understanding of that. I think it came in different levels for me. When I was in Senegal, I was a minority, like Katie said, and I did have some experiences. And Katie just reminded me of one specifically that I think was probably where I got the most. I experienced the fear of that, and I was in a car going to Tuba, way in the middle of nowhere. I'll tell you where I was because I don't remember, but it was like there was like this dust cloud thing, and we had to stop the car, and I was in the front, and people were banging on the windows, pointing at me, teasing me, saying, "Look at her," as if I was like a circus animal. And it wouldn't stop, and it didn't go away. And I had nothing to do there's nothing I could do to stop it. So I just remember, I just said, I need to get out of this front. I can't be in the front, because no one had ever seen a white person. So for me, that was like probably the most scary experience I had. But I also knew I was choosing to be there. I had money, I had privilege. Do you know what I'm saying? So even in a situation where I was afraid, I was choosing to live in Senegal. This is not the choice. People of color don't choose. They don't choose. They don't have any special place they can go away, quote unquote, to not be discriminated against. So I think it gave me a glimpse into what it's like to feel that targeted. I would also say that having my kids, though, and being at this time right now, also brought it to a whole new level. I frequently get comments and these are kind of the normal comments of, oh, are they your kids? They're not Sotan. People questioning that, or even just the typical school experiences and how people react to my children. How people react to my husband during healthcare appointments. Do they listen to him? Do they talk to him? Are my kids encouraged? You know what I mean? I see it all the time, how it plays out on sort of a daily basis. So I do think having kids and being married has given me like a greater depth of understanding. And I'm continuing to learn every day. I mean, I don't feel like I'll ever stop learning because I'm not living it every day. You know what I'm saying? So I think that the privilege, you always have privilege. So you're always learning, but I think it's hit different levels for me, and particularly with the murder of George Floyd. When people were coming in from out of town, going after people of color, like blatantly, I think I have felt fear for my children on a whole other level than I've felt before. So.
Yes.
Well, look, can I say one thing?
Yes, Kathy. What do you?
I feel like when you ask about having children, that's a natural question of when you started learning systemic racism. But really, to learn systemic racism, it's about undoing your own racism, to understand that. And I think it is about falling in love, or loving. It doesn't have to be a husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, that kind of love. Loving a person of color deeply is how white people change. And it's because they can no longer dehumanize. When you are in love, when you are loving another human being, it equalizes you in a way that nothing else does. And so I think my travel to Senegal and my initial falling in love with different people, the moms in my village who took care of me, who made the best millet in the whole world. I loved them and they loved me. And I came back changed before I ever was pregnant. But of course, the love of children or love of a spouse is different and deeper. But it's all it takes for white people is to have a deep, loving relationship with someone.
Yes. And it sounds like, what I'm hearing is, for instance, being open and going outside of your comfort zone, which is what the two of you did, instead of just staying here in America, where, during your little bit before your times, blacks and whites are separated, and there is barriers between the two cultures. And now you're in Africa, where everybody is black, and you see the different world, you just see the different side. You're learning it for yourself, not from the system, not from what you've been told, not from the prejudices. So you saw it for yourself and you fell in love with it, and you can't unlove it when you love something, and you cannot dehumanize something that you love. And that's very true. That's a very good point, Katie. And Colleen, going back to you, tell us about the question that Katie answered earlier, which is what is the difference between the way your parents brought you up and the way you doing your upbringing for your racial kids?
Yeah, my parents never talked about race either. Race was not us. We didn't discuss injustice. If we did, it was actually us kids bringing up the fact that we didn't agree with our parents about certain things. So I think I was definitely like had a greater consciousness at a lot younger age, and would seek out opportunities and places that around learning and and that were different from my own, and that was sort of my nature, I believe. Sorry, I have a little Fatu next to me. Wants to join.
Okay.
So I think talking about it fairly openly was just something that never happened in my household, and I don't think there was any awareness or understanding of that. I would say that my sisters, we would talk about it as sisters, you know what I mean? And my brother, I'm the oldest of 5, but it wasn't something we talked about or understood, or like that people took, really took any sort of stance on. And I would say that's absolutely not the way I'm raising my kids now. I'm like doing the opposite of that. So, and also, just really supporting them as they go through the experiences, I think is really important. And sometimes it is me who needs to be part of it, but sometimes it's my husband who needs to be part of something. So I had an issue with when my son was participating in an activity that to me was just very clearly racist. And all the other parents were like, well, they were all excusing it. I'm like, there's no excuse, and he, after that, I talked to him, but he didn't need me. He needed my husband through that. And I just, I had to hold that space for him. And I think that's really important too. So I think we're really trying to be conscious of it, also trying to name it when we see it, and not let it just be excused away, or, which is what I think I grew up learning. Oh, that, he was blah, 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 or that was, da, da, da. It was all these, there's always reasons to explain that, the problem that happened, versus like just say this was wrong and we need to take a stance in it. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, very, very interesting analysis and ways, 2 different ways. And also, what I was even thinking more is that, for instance, when you were growing up in all white or neighborhood or household, your parents probably were not worried about you getting out late or being a teenager and driving a car out late, as opposed to you as a mom now, or Katie. Thinking about, oh, my kid is going out and driving at night. I bet it's 2 different feelings as moms, the way your mom felt and the way you're feeling right now.
I would agree. I mean, my kids aren't driving yet, so I haven't had that experience. But the experience I do have is treated in a classroom and how their behavior is handled. And so I think that has been the issue for me as a mom, particularly with a Black son. My son has the temper, he has a lot of emotions at times, and and so the teachers who have worked well with him have been the ones who've really, like, again, loved him, developed that close relationship with him where he feels safe, and then that works. But I've had lots of examples where that hasn't happened. And I think that, and even for one of my daughters, where the words used to describe her behavior were frankly just flat out racist. I mean, they were, she was cheating, or she was lying, or she was hiding and stealing something, yeah. So I think, again, how we choose to assign traits to kids with behavior, and how they act, they normally act by their race, I think is also really clear. And that actually has always really, that's a big issue. And actually this year, what I told my teachers is that they said, well, what do you want to talk? Do you want to talk about anything? I said, yes, I want to talk about racism. I want to talk about how my kids are experiencing the trauma of what's happening right now. This is part of what they need to talk about in classrooms. Yeah. So I think I'm seeing it on a smaller level because they're not driving around, but certainly there are a lot of other concerning trends that you see when racism starts at a young age. Yeah. So.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for those great answers that you two provided. And my next question is that have any of you witnessed their child being experiencing racism for the first time, and how did you react to it? Who wants to go first?
So for the first time, and that was actually the memory that Brandon has, the same one which I did not know until you just told me that. Mm-hmm. We were down in Austin, Minnesota, and visiting his cousin who was white. They were very close, and I did not realize, of course, that he was not defining himself as Black yet, but he was probably 5, maybe 5. And they came running back saying that someone had screamed the N-word at him. And I remember jumping in the car and getting Brandon and Lauren in the car with me and saying, which direction? What did the car look like? These are 5 and 6-year-olds. I'm sure they were like, we have no idea, Mom. And they were like that. But they said it happened over here. So I was like ready. I don't know what I was going to do if I found these people. They were probably kids themselves. But I was rageful. And looking at Brandon's face made me rageful. And what we did was talk about it. We talked it out. And Lauren, to this day, is probably one of the more, she's Brandon's, they're 3 days apart. So they're his white cousin. She lives in Minneapolis. She's probably one of the, I can count probably both my hands, the number of white people that I would say are deeply aware of their own racism and being white supremacy on a daily basis. And Lauren is one of those kids. And I think that's because she went through it with Brandon. She was there. We sat down and we talked about what happened. We talked about how you can react to that, how wrong it is. And we processed that for a while. And I didn't know, and Brandon probably couldn't have told me then. He didn't have the language to say, I'm realizing right now that I'm different than everybody around me for the first time. And I wasn't thinking that either. I was just trying to get through it with him and figure out how to make it hurt less, which is not always what we should be doing, but it's what a mother does.
Yes, I mean, you would never expect that or think when that would happen. Me, myself, I am terrified to see my child go through that. Thanks God I haven't witnessed anything dramatic yet, but that's a fear that every mom has. And yeah, Lynn, what did you have any of those experiences? Can you tell us about it?
Like I said, a little bit more on the subtle side, but definitely racist. Like I remember going to the Y, and there's one kid who was telling him he had a fat butt, and the cars just got really upset. And he said, "Well, you haven't let me talk. I don't want to say anything anymore." And he was just, really close to tears. And again, I walked up and talked to the coach about it after I talked to the parents. And it was like, oh yeah, but it was like 20 minutes. It was like painful to watch him, and not as a parent. Like I was just wasn't sure that I should have interviewed probably and just said, hey, this has got to stop. This isn't, appropriate. You keep missing my son. Anyway, he worked through it, and he had a friend who was really supportive of him, and my husband was there obviously and talked with him. I talked with him about it too, but he really blamed the girls initially for it. And I said, no, I don't think it's the girls. I think the coach's job was to ask you.
Yes.
And why do you think the coach didn't ask you? And then we kind of talked through it through. So I think there are a lot of.
Yes, absolutely. And, kids are kids, and they don't know any better. So it's the parents that have to talk about it and educate their kids. And that's why we're having this show, to raise awareness to parents, to teach their kids or make them aware, so they know how to talk to their peers, they know how to play with their friends. And it's and like you said, it's very painful to watch your kids go through that, and that's what Black parents experience every day in their lives. So the next question is that is there, I mean, how do you combine like the different cultures, like raising your biracial kids from your white background culturally, and then trying to give them that culture that they, because when you see them, they are your kid. So, but when you get out, they are your kids still. But when the world sees them, for instance, when, let's say, a racist or white supremacist sees your kid, they don't see them as your kid, like a kid that has a white mom. If you get out as a white lady, they probably won't harm you or threaten you the way they would do to your child, because their child, they see them as a Black person. So how do you help your kids navigate those two cultures, your culture and trying to help them be part of or know or identify with the culture that they are seen as when they get out?
When they get out in the world, you mean?
Yes.
I think the most important thing that I've seen in both my children is the importance of being grounded as, and this is not true of African Americans who are not the descendants of enslaved Africans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Brandon and Isatu, neither of their parents come from a lineage of descendants of slaves.
Right.
They come from a joke, right? And once you're a joke, you know you're a king or a queen. And they grew up knowing, both of them grew up knowing that they had a strong core that was African. And that has been probably the most important thing that has kept both of them strong and whole.
Yes.
So that they're not broken. And I'm not saying that my African American friends that are descendants of enslaved Africans are broken, but they have to come through more pain. There's something about that experience that is very harmful.
Yes.
To the soul. Harmful. Yes. To the soul. And not that Brandon and Isatu are both defined as Black. They're clearly Black. And they go out and they are perceived as Black, but they have a resiliency that some of that crap, some of that poison can kind of go off their backs in a way that is important. And I remember when Mamadou was here, and he'd been here maybe 3 years maybe, and he was teaching in a charter school. So he was in the educational system, and I remember him coming home one night and said, "Wow, African Americans are screwed in this country." Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like I'm going to be screwed like that. They are screwed. And just to see it took him 2 years, and it was really clear a difference between how Africans were at least being themselves reacting to white supremacy, but and how they're seeing, either Mamadou was seeing his students or other teachers who were African Americans feeling or reacting differently and treated differently.
Yes.
The truth is, white supremacy will look well upon an African before they will look well upon an African American. That's true. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Supremacy. And you raise a great point. How the kid defines how they feel inside, and that defines also how resilient they are. and how proud of themselves they are and their self-esteem as well. Like you said, yes, my kids are half African American, half African. I am African, but my daughter always identifies herself strongly as a Fulani girl. When she's dressed up and she has a braid, she thinks of herself as, I am a Fulani girl. I mean, she loves her culture here. She knows she's African American, but she has that African part of her that she really hangs on to as a Fulani girl, as a princess Fulani, as a Torodo, and that gives her strength. And I am happy that she has that identification that I have as well, to the point where nothing that is in front of me can tread on that identity. And unfortunately, that's what many African Americans don't have, because it was stripped of them. And they have so many wounds that are chronically passed on from generation to generation that are hard to remove. So yes, it's very different when somebody is a non slavery descendant, as opposed to somebody who's descendant of slavery. And Colleen, what do you have to add to this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the history is really important, and it's the generational trauma that has come through that history that it changes things. And I think that it's a different journey. It's a different struggle. I would say my kids too, generally speaking, very much identify as being African American, like Senegalese African American. We haven't had the luxury to go back and forth to Senegal as much as Katie and her family, which unfortunately now I'm thinking we have to do that more.
I had a GoFundMe. Thanks, Bolo. She gave me some money for that. Yeah, one was a GoFundMe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that again that when they have gone back, and Soraya actually has gone once, and so the identification is really clear, and what she learned and saw over there was really important. And so I do think we try to incorporate that into the daily life, particularly in the way we're raising the kids, and whether it be food, whether it be culture. And the other thing that they're doing, which I think is helping too, is they're part of a bilingual school. It's a Spanish immersion school in Robbinsdale. And, like, I'll just tell you a funny example. So we're doing distance learning, and Fatu heard this song, and she said, well, this is my name. Well, it was Toure Kunda's Fatu song. So I think, isn't that funny? So I think that, like having a cultural environment where they're learning a different language and their brain is functioning that way, and all the kids are from different cultures, I think has been really helpful for them. I think they have been very energized by that and feel very strong about that. The other thing too is last year, my daughter really chose a lot of African American women to study. She did multiple projects on Maya Angelou, and so the identification of her, as she's identifying with positive woman, Black woman role models, I think we've really encouraged that a lot too.
Yes.
So like, Beyonce has this new Black is King, and there's a song, Brown Skin Girl.
Yes.
Pearls, the skin like pearls. So my daughters are singing that all the time. So it's just like allowing that experience to happen and giving space and like really celebrating it, I think is really important.
Yes. And my good friend, Madam Gay, who's a assistant professor, University of North Carolina, just had a comment that says, let's use the term enslaved instead of slaves. And African Americans, oh, I lost my thingy. Hold on. I was reading what she said. And she said African Americans' identities against each other, to avoid that. In the end, they are both Black in America. Racists do not care where you're from. The only thing that matters to them is skin color. That rhetoric is dangerous. Dr. Mariam Gay, if you want to call, we have the phone number on the top. Please call us and tell us your thoughts. And yes, when I mean, what we are talking here, Dr. Gay, is that the kid's self-esteem, like inside their identification, it's what they feel and how they see themselves when they know I am from this lineage, I'm from here. That's what we are talking about. But yes, if they get outside of the house, they are all black. The bad cops or the white supremacists, when you're outside of your house, they don't care where you're from or who you are. You're black, whether you're American descendants of slaves, or you're African from Senegal or South Africa, you are black. You're
and
right.
Bolo, can I just say, when I speak about the descendants of enslaved Africans and African newly immigrated Africans or first generation African immigrants, I'm really speaking from my experience and what I'm hearing from African American people that I'm in relationship with. And I'm thinking more of systemic. Let me give you a good example. In St. Paul, the way the white supremacist system has shaped the community development world, it has allowed organizations to define themselves by their ethnicity. So we have Little Mekong for all the Southeast Asian businesses. Yeah. And we have Little Africa for African newly immigrated or first generation Africans getting support for community development. Is no African American organization like that. So I'm talking more systemically how it plays itself out. When you're on the street and you're all walking down the street, yes, if you're all black, all of you are black, and that's all that matters. But there is a hierarchy in the community development or public sphere. So a city is where I'm talking about, or a county, where I have heard African American friends of mine, descendants of enslaved Africans. That's how and that's a definition that people are slowly coming to. And I'm talking about those folks defining themselves as that.
And that's true. I mean, I agree. Systematically, that's true. But then, like you said, if somebody is I don't know how to say that, but most of the time, people who have accent from Africa are more tolerated than people who have accent from North Minneapolis that are considered sometimes rude, you're vulgar, you're this, you're that. And that, in that sense, I can understand where the Africans are more tolerated under certain people's eyes than the African Americans. But then I think that's, like, in my opinion, that's the food. I don't know if this is how I pronounce it, but that's been going on for generation after generation between African Americans and white supremacists. So I think that's what's going on, while Africans just came in and they were not here when that fight was happening, and maybe they don't have that drama going on between them. But in that sense, yes. But then at the same time, also, when we all out, we are all black. So yes,
as Madam Gay said, it is dangerous. Madam Gay is right. That is white supremacy playing itself out. Any kind of hierarchy, or you get this and you don't get that, and African Americans are always on the bottom of the thing, that's white supremacy. And it is dangerous. I agree with Madam Gay. It's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just reminding me a little bit of, like, France. I can't remember what years it was, where African Americans were brought over and seen as these very celebrated people, and then the African immigrants were treated very poorly. So it's kind of that reversal, but it's very similar into the more divisiveness you have. It's another form of systemic racism, is creating the divisive, right?
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah, and then once again, as Miriam has pointed out, sometimes those kind of treatments divides more the Africans and African Americans, because it's not fair when, and sometimes you hear African Americans saying to Africans, you came here, you're taking our jobs, you're doing this, you're doing that. And Africans come here, they get all the prejudice about African Americans that, oh, they're lazy, or they don't do this, they don't do that. And then when you come in a country, I saw that on TikTok videos where somebody explained it really clearly, where you come from Africa and you already have like 2 degrees and or 3 masters or something, and then you come here and you hear, oh, this group of people who look like you are very lazy. They are the bottom of the society. They are this and they are that. So what are you going to do is you come in here to look for success. So what you're going to do is you don't want to be associated with those people. You don't want to be associated with somebody who doesn't want to do something, when in reality that's just the ways the system designed to look African American that low, to divide and to keep them down. So, and that's what people need to be aware of. We are all the same, like we said, if we go outside we are all the same, but we should not let that divide us. We should not let that make us see each other in a different way.
But like everything that has to do with white supremacy, you have to be very intentional about that. So you have to have conversations that own that tension, which is very hard to do because it's that underspoken, people know you're already fragile. So if you let really everyone know how vulnerable you are, and that's white supremacy again, but the intentionality of fighting that is what's so important. And what I loved about you, Bolo, and your organizing and everyone that came up to the George Floyd Memorial, was it the second week after the murder? It was very soon after.
Yeah, around
and
second.
You came up as a Senegalese community and you supported and embraced. I love that. And so did people up there.
Yeah, that showed a lot of.
Yes, I mean, I give credit to my friend Huja Ja, who organized that, and because it's a great initiative we all followed, because we are all the same. If you African Americans and Africans, we are all the same, and whatever is hurting them will hurt us as well, because we have 2 different cultural backgrounds, but on the outside we are all on the same block. So just like a lot of white people came to support too. It's something human in you that when somebody is down, all what you want to do is to go and help them, lift them up, and we all came together to do that.
Yes.
It was great solidarity for sure.
It was.
So yeah, I mean, Mariam, the Africans and African American thing is a topic for a different day. We'll keep that in mind. But just one last question for each one of you or couple, so that we can close this. We are close to finishing the hour. I would like to know, what was the challenge you have in raising biracial kids, and also biracial kids in this America of 2020, and also what is a piece of advice you want to give to young couples who are also raising or about to raise biracial kids? Katie, you can go first.
I think for your first question,
challenge, yep.
I think the hardest thing right now is because the whole world is kind of turning, or it isn't, but the feel of it with Trump is, and the federal government and the pandemic and the murders of Black and brown people make it hard to be hopeful when you're 20, or even when you're 35 and Black. It's like, what is it even? Can I do anything that will ever change? Am I going to get murdered tomorrow? If I step out of line, it's a really scary place. And I don't have to tell you that. And that's it. It's keeping hope alive in my kids so that they can have a life. That's all they're asking for, right? That's all of us want. So keeping the hope, loving them through this, and encouraging them to believe that they can be whoever they want to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What piece of advice are you giving to the young couples with biracial kids? Knowing what you know now.
Yep. To be honest with each other and with your children and talk about everything, even if it's super, super hard. And protect them. If your family and there are times where I have had to protect my children from my family. And so if you're the white person in that relationship, being super honest about where racism is still alive and well in your family circles, so that trust can be, because trust in family, you need that as a child and as a young adult. So to be very careful about that, but also to make sure that you enjoy each other's differences and respect and love each other's cultures. So again, that white person, if you're Irish, bring in your Irish self. If you're Scottish, find out what that means. Bring that to the relationship. Yeah. Doesn't sound like very good advice, but that's what I would say right after that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question here that Madam asked. What are the mothers doing to have them accept and reconcile that part of their heritage that is white, while whiteness is trying by demean them? Is trying to demean them, I think.
It's time to what? What was that last part?
So the question is, what are the mothers doing to have them accept the kids, to have them accept and reconcile that part of the heritage that is white, while whiteness is trying to demean them?
That's a really
because
good question.
I remember, Katie,
Colleen?
I remember Brandon when he came on my show last time, he was saying that he didn't mean it in a bad way, but he was kind of like having hard time with whiteness. He did not want to identify with it because of the experience, because of how they viewing how not I shouldn't say they, how the white supremacists are viewing him as a Black person.
Yeah. It's a Colleen. I talk too much. You go.
Well, I just appreciate your wisdom, Katie. So I feel like how can I go after you? You've just
stop.
A much better. So we're talking about raise the kids right now. I think protecting the kids is really important right now. I think again supporting their resilience, supporting their positive development, and giving them space to we try to really talk about what's happening, and I don't sugarcoat anything with the kids, even with the 6-year-old. I'm just very matter of fact about it, because I feel like. And then we talk through that. But I think, again, we are in such a difficult time right now with these many layers of crises that people are experiencing. And the children feel that. I mean, they see what's happening they see it in their lives, and then they're not allowed to be at school as much. I mean, there's just so many different pieces to that. So I think, again, I really agree with supporting kids' resilience, but also keeping that open and honest communication discussion and allow feelings, whatever feelings, to come out, right? Because that's what helps take the edge off and helps them also grow in how they're processing it. So I think, and also taking breaks if you can. I mean, this is pretty heavy for a lot of kids, and sometimes they just need safe space, right, to do that and just enjoy themselves. So I think there's that as well. As far as for family members who don't agree, I mean, I think, as a white person, I always struggle with people in my family who I don't agree with on these issues. And I'm not like physically close to them very often anyway, so it makes it a little bit easier. But there's no convincing, is what I find. It's very much like, Trump or whatever, and not understanding that Trump is being racist. And I think for those individuals, I think that changing their mindset means changing their whole worldview. And for some people, I don't think they think that they can do that. They think that everything will fall apart. And to me, that's so clear to me with also what happened with the murder of George Floyd, where pretty much all of South Minneapolis burned down before they put Keith Ellison in charge of to move just a bit towards some sort of justice is just so hard. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also somewhat trying to be realistic that I don't know that my kids will enjoy what I had hoped that they would have. I mean, I'm going to support them and bring them along as much as I can. And ultimately, we're still, as a society, we are just not, we need to make more gains from my perspective. So what was that last question? That was a question around how are you
whiteness
with your white, with their white side?
Yeah, how what are the mothers doing to have the kids accept and reconcile their white heritage while whiteness is demeaning them?
I talk bad about white people all the time. I cannot stand white people. I mean, in general, and I'm not talking about everybody, but there is a white way of like, and for Senegalese people, it's got to kill you. So you're walking down the sidewalk, or you're coming into a room, and you're the only other human being as a white person, right? And do they look at you and say hello? White people do not say hello.
They don't.
They say hello to me.
They do?
Yeah.
Because you say hi first. Look at you. You're all smiles. You say it first. But I'm saying, if you didn't say it, say, Bolo, you had a hard day, or you were thinking about something else, you're going to walk right past white people, and they're not going to say hi. And that's just an example, a quick example. I think with my kids, that allowing them to talk about white people, I let them talk about white people any way they want. And I will talk about white people and their whiteness. I think that openness to talk dirt about white people is okay in our house.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't want them to love me or white people that we're in relationship with and that are acting out of justice. But it's okay also to be honest about just how bad whiteness, not individual white people, but whiteness is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking about white privilege and what that means and naming it, I feel like my kids are still figuring all that out.
It's older.
Yeah, they're not really at that point of rejecting it, but they might be at some point, and that's okay with me as long as we can keep, talk about respect, and they can talk about how uncomfortable, they can talk about this person being, I'm fine with that as well, because that's the reality, right? I mean, our kids are going to need safe spaces to be who they are. And in some times they might be rejected by both sides because they're biracial. I mean, there are times that my kids might not be Black enough, or they're not white enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard place to be, because if they were to go to Senegal, for example, they might really resonate with the culture, and they know they're Senegalese, but they're also they're biracial. So what does that mean when they go? That they're going to have they might be called Tubab. Well, I know. So my point is, they're gonna need to be able to talk about how they feel in their situations. And I think when the weight of that and what's happening hits them, it is going to be complete rejection of white culture, and that's fine. I mean, they have to figure it within themselves. They have to talk about also the values. And I think there are people who are white who are allies, and there are a lot of people who aren't. So that might be kind of, I think, how it plays out as we move forward. Yeah, because I think those, once you hit middle school and the teenage years, it becomes even more pronounced from what I
Yeah,
I would never have had
I think
that
those are
taken.
great points. And there is, I mean, like maybe white supremacists, like which maybe systemic white in general, but there are so many whiteness or white of role models or like a positive good side that they can identify with. They may not identify with the white supremacists, but there are a lot of white greatness that they can also identify with. And that is also across the borders. Like Colleen said, their kids may sometimes not be white enough or sometimes not be black enough. I have a friend that has biracial kids too, who was unable to make it here but gave me her opinion. Her kids are very light to the point where one of them, she has two, a boy and a girl. The boy is kind of like almost passing as white. The girl is more, I mean, darker, but still the girl gets told by her black friends that she's not black enough. So again, they may have issues on both sides, but also what we can do for our kids to help them is to teach them the best of both.
That's
like
right.
My daughter, I told her, you are African American, you are African. Like right now, when she started her homeschooling, I printed out pictures of, listen, Katie, your kid's descendant, Lajor Ngonelati Job, who was a king in Africa. I printed out a picture of him, and Elijah Martal and Aline Sitoé Diatta, who's a queen as well, who's a warrior, African woman warrior. And also I printed out pictures of, African American heroes, Martin Luther King and um, uh, Obama and all of the great ladies. And I printed all of those out for her. I said, yeah, these are great people. I told her about the story behind them and what they did. So getting the kids to get the best out of both cultures, whether it's the white culture or African American, I think it just make them better people. It help them have eyes, lenses that help them see the world and make changes. We should not have them fear both worlds, but let's give them the best of them, because they will see the worst of it for sure by themselves without us even saying it.
Yeah, that's true.
So and I think you guys did a great job. This is a very interesting topic. This is just part one. We'll be having part two, and part two will be about white women who adopted black kids. So that's another issue that we need to bring here and talk about. And also, once again, like I said, I'm passionate about this, and we have all this in common. We all are passionate about social justice and bringing changes and taking out the unfairness. And as a healthcare professional, I view this and I see this as the treatment of Black people here, especially African American male, as a public health issue. That's why I feel strongly about talking about it and about raising awareness. Like I said at the beginning, many people will say, "Oh, I'm not racist because I do a lot of good things for Black people. I do a lot of good things for Africans or for poor people around the world. I have Black grandsons, Black adoptees." So all of that, yes, you are not racist, but if you don't look at the system and you don't understand what the system is doing, then you're not being racist, is not serving anybody any good. We have to come together and open our eyes and see what's going on and learn. And once you learn and once you're educated, that's when you know, and that's when you can make changes. And that's why we are making these shows to help raise awareness. Once again, Colleen, thank you so much. And if I haven't told you, I love your dress. Thank you for coming and joining me. I appreciate it. And Katie, once again, thank you so much. And you are very dedicated. You both are, and I see what you do. And Katie, you are just like a strong, strong woman who's very much involved and, teaching the community and advocating. And Colleen, we see all the great work you're doing also, and helping the community health, immigrants, and all of that. Thank you so much for all the goodness that you do.
Too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, if you, Colleen and Katie, you can go back to the comments. If there's any questions you can answer, that would be great. And bring your questions. We'll be happy to answer. Have a great evening, and we'll inform you for the next show. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Molly.
Did you stop? Okay. You know, I can't tell if it's going or it's a stop. I just see myself in it in any case. Okay. All right.